it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen.
I took part in a deadly game on the deep web by Darius McCorkindale. Part 1. The sun had barely risen, but the mall was already a hive of activity. Early Black Friday morning brought with it a sense of electric anticipation. Shoppers swarmed through the entrance, their faces lit with the promise of unbeatable deals. The dissonance of hurried footsteps, excited chatter, and the occasional squeal of joy filled the air, creating a chaotic yet strangely festive atmosphere. Banners boasting enormous discounts hung from the ceilings, swaying gently as the flow of people moved beneath them. Among the throng of eager bargain hunters was Alex, a young man in his late 20s. He navigated the crowd with an almost maniacal look, clutching a list of items he knew he didn't really need. Stress shopping had become his go-to distraction, a way to escape the tangled mess of thoughts and emotions that had been weighing him down. His life had recently taken a series of unpleasant turns, leaving him grasping for any semblance of control. Alex tried to focus on the task at hand, forcing himself to care about the latest tech gadgets and trendy clothes. However, as he moved from store to store, he felt a growing sense of unease. It wasn't just the usual anxiety that came with crowds and noise. This was different, more insidious. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia. After all, security cameras were everywhere in the mall, keeping an eye on potential shoplifters. But the sensation persisted, a prickling at the back of his neck that refused to go away. Each time he glanced up at a camera, it seemed to swivel in his direction, the lens following him with an almost predatory precision. The festive atmosphere around him began to feel uncomfortable. The bright lights and cheery decorations contrasted sharply with the cold, mechanical eyes tracking his every move. While he tried to tell himself it was just his imagination, a trick of the mind brought on by stress and fatigue. Yet as he picked up a discounted smartwatch and headed to the next store, the feeling only deepened. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, sir." Alex turned to see a man in a store uniform, his face pale and eyes darting nervously. "Could you, come with me, please? There's, an issue we need to discuss." Alex's heart skipped a beat. "What is this about?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Please," the man insisted, glancing around as if he feared they were being overheard. "It's important." Alex reluctantly followed the man through the throng of shoppers, his mind racing with possibilities. As they weaved through the crowd, the bustling energy of the mall seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a chilling sense of foreboding. Little did Alex know, but his morning of stress shopping was about to take a dark and deadly turn. Alex's thoughts were racing as he followed the nervous store manager through the bustling mall. The festive decorations and cheerful music now seemed distant, almost surreal, as a sense of dread settled over him. They maneuvered through the maze of aisles and displays until they reached a small, unassuming door marked Manager's Office. The manager, a man in his early 40s with sweat beading on his forehead, ushered Alex inside and closed the door behind them. The office was cluttered with paperwork, boxes, and a few outdated posters promoting long-past sales events. The manager gestured for Alex to sit in a worn leather chair while he perched on the edge of his desk, wringing his hands nervously. "I'm sorry to drag you away from your shopping," the manager began, his voice shaky. "But there's something you need to know, something very important." Alex leaned forward, his unease growing. "What's going on? Is there a problem with my payment?" The manager shook his head. "No, it's not that. Well, it's hard to explain. But I noticed something unusual on the security feeds. The cameras." Alex interrupted, his voice tense. "Yeah, the cameras have been following me. I've noticed." The manager's eyes widened. "So you've seen it too. That makes this even more urgent." He took a deep breath and continued. "You're a part of something terrible that you didn't sign up for. There's a game being played, a deadly game. and you're an unwitting participant." Alex stared at the manager in disbelief. "The game? What are you talking about?" The manager stood up and began pacing. "It's called the Game of Shadows. It's run on the deep web, and it involves tracking unsuspecting people through public surveillance systems. Participants are people like you, chosen at random. And the goal for the killers, because that's what they are, is to find and murder their targets to win a substantial prize." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "Why me? How did I get involved in this?" "I don't know," the manager admitted, stopping to face Alex. "But you're not the only one. There are others, all being hunted as we speak. The cameras track your movements and send updates to the killers. But look, there's something you need to understand. Because I've told you this, you have a slight advantage. You know they're coming, and you can use that knowledge to stay one step ahead." The gravity of the situation began to sink in, and Alex's mind raced with questions. "How do I get out of this? Can't we call the police?" The manager shook his head again, his expression grim. "The police won't be able to stop this. The people behind this game are highly organized and deeply embedded in the dark corners of the internet. Your best bet is to stay alert, stay mobile, and avoid places where you can easily be cornered. Use the crowd to your advantage and remember that the killers only get intermittent updates about your location." Alex stood up, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "What about you? Aren't you in danger for telling me this?" The manager nodded. "Yeah, I probably am, but I couldn't just let you walk around without knowing. Please, be careful." With a final tense nod, Alex left the office. The bustling mall now felt like a labyrinth filled with unseen dangers. Every glance from a fellow shopper, every movement caught by a camera, felt like a potential threat. He had to stay vigilant. He had to survive. The game had begun, and Alex was determined to beat it. Alex left the manager's office with his mind in a whirlwind. The revelation that he was an unwitting participant in a deadly game being played out on the deep web felt surreal, like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He pushed through the crowded mall, trying to blend in with the sea of shoppers, all the while acutely aware of the myriad security cameras tracking his every move. As he navigated through the bustling aisles, snippets of the manager's explanation replayed in his mind. The killers, competing to murder their targets, the intermittent updates about his location. It all felt like something from a twisted movie. But the fear biting away at him was very real. He ducked into a corner of a bookstore, attempting to collect his thoughts. His initial panic was overwhelming. His breaths came in short, rapid gasps, and his hands trembled as he clutched his phone. He had to stay calm, had to think clearly if he was going to survive. Alex reviewed the manager's words. As far as he knew, he was the first and maybe only participant to be informed about the game, giving him a slight advantage. He had to use that knowledge to his benefit. The killers received occasional updates about his location, but they didn't have a constant feed. This meant he could mislead them, hopefully stay one step ahead if he played his cards right. A sense of purpose began to replace his initial sense of panic. Alex knew he couldn't just wander aimlessly. He needed a plan. He scanned the bookstore looking for anything that might help. Grabbing a few maps and a couple of books on urban survival, he quickly paid and moved on. He knew he couldn't stay in one place too long. His first goal was to get out of the mall without being noticed. He spotted a service exit used by employees and headed in that direction. As he approached, he saw a janitor wheeling a cart out of a supply closet. Thinking quickly, Alex slipped into the closet and changed into a spare uniform he found hanging inside. It wasn't a perfect disguise, but it might help him avoid immediate detection. Wearing the janitor's uniform, Alex exited through the service door, stepping into the cool morning air. The mall's parking lot was a huge, sprawling expanse, filled with cars and ever more people streaming in for the Black Friday deals. He needed to find a safe place to regroup and figure out his next move. As he walked briskly through the parking lot, he noticed a black SUV idling near an entrance. The windows were tinted, and a sense of foreboding washed over him. Was it one of the killers? Well, he couldn't be sure, but he couldn't take any chances. He altered his path, weaving between cars, trying to stay out of sight. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He hesitated before pulling it out, fearing it might be another twist in this nightmare. To his relief, it was a message from a friend, just a casual check-in. He typed a quick, cryptic reply, hoping it would alert them if something went wrong. Alex continued to move through the lot. His mind was racing with strategies to stay ahead. He remembered the manager's advice. Use the crowd to his advantage. Avoid places where he could easily be cornered. He reached the edge of the parking lot and slipped into a nearby alley, shedding the janitor's uniform and blending back into the crowd on the busy street beyond. As he walked, he kept glancing over his shoulder, aware that any moment could bring another threat. His initial panic had transformed into a steely resolve. He would survive this game. He had to. Every step he took was a calculated move in a deadly chess match, and Alex was determined to outwit his unseen opponents. The game had begun, and he was ready to play. Alex moved swiftly through the streets, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The crowded sidewalks offered a brief sense of anonymity, but he knew it wouldn't last. He needed to find a more secure location to think and plan his next move. His mind raced with possibilities. Each scenario was tinged with the fear of imminent danger. Reaching a busy intersection, Alex instinctively ducked into a coffee shop. The place was bustling with morning commuters, offering him a temporary refuge. He found a table in the corner, his back to the wall, and pulled out his phone, pretending to scroll through it while keeping a vigilant eye on the entrance. Just as he began to feel a sliver of safety, he noticed a man in a hooded jacket lingering outside the shop. The man's gaze swept the interior, then fixed on Alex for a split second before he turned away. Well, it might have been nothing, but it was enough to set off alarm bells in Alex's mind. He quickly gathered his things and headed for the rear exit, slipping out into a narrow alley. As he emerged, he heard footsteps behind him, fast and powerful. Without looking back, Alex broke into a run, weaving through the maze of alleys and side streets, his heart pounding in his chest. He rounded a corner and stumbled into an empty parking lot behind an old warehouse. The lot was mostly deserted, save for a few scattered cars. His pursuer's footsteps grew louder, and Alex knew he had to act fast. He spotted another SUV, although this one didn't look like a surveillance vehicle. It was parked near the edge of the lot, and he sprinted towards it, sliding underneath to hide. The footsteps slowed as they entered the parking lot. Alex held his breath, peering out from beneath the vehicle. He saw the hooded man scanning the area, his eyes cold and calculating. Now the man moved methodically, checking behind dumpsters and around cars. Alex's heart raced as the man drew closer, his footsteps echoing ominously. Just as the man approached the SUV, a group of teenagers entered the lot, laughing and talking loudly. The distraction was enough. The hooded man hesitated, then turned and walked away, blending into the shadows. Alex waited a few more minutes, ensuring the coast was clear before crawling out from under the SUV. He realized just how close he'd come to being caught and possibly killed. The reality of his situation hit him like a tidal wave. This was no game. It was a life and death struggle, and his pursuers were both ruthless and resourceful. Determined not to be an easy target, Alex knew he had to think strategically. He couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. The manager's words echoed in his mind. The killers received intermittent updates about his location. He could use that to his advantage. He needed to form a plan, a way to stay ahead of his pursuers and anticipate their moves. Alex found a secluded spot behind the warehouse and pulled out the maps he'd bought earlier. He spread them out, marking key locations where he felt he could find cover and potential escape routes. He also noted crowded areas where he could blend in and confuse the killers. Next, he considered his resources. His phone could be a double-edged sword, useful for communication but also a potential tracking device. He decided to use it sparingly, only when absolutely necessary. He also made a mental list of supplies he might need: food, water, first aid, and perhaps some basic self-defense items. As the day slowly wore on, Alex moved from location to location, never staying in one place for too long. He practiced altering his appearance with simple changes, putting on a hat, changing his jacket, wearing sunglasses, anything to throw off potential pursuers. His planning seemingly paid off later that evening when he noticed another suspicious figure tailing him through a crowded market. Using the knowledge he'd gained, Alex led the pursuer on a convoluted path through narrow alleys and crowded plazas, eventually losing them in the chaos of a street festival. Breathing a sigh of relief, Alex realized he'd successfully outmaneuvered another threat. He was learning, adapting, becoming more adept at this deadly game. But he knew this was just the beginning. The killers wouldn't give up easily, and he had to stay one step ahead. As night fell, Alex found temporary shelter in an abandoned building, barricading himself in a small room. He knew he couldn't stay there long, but it gave him a moment to rest and regroup. This had been an insane sequence of events that had escalated at a lightning pace. His mind raced with question after question. In doing so, his determination hardened into resolve. He'd done nothing to put himself in this situation, and he would survive this ordeal. He had to. For now, he had the beginnings of a plan and the will to execute it. The game was far from over, but Alex was ready to fight for his life. The mall had long since emptied out, its festive energy replaced by the eerie silence of an abandoned liminal space. Alex had hoped to find safety in numbers, but now, in the dead of night, he found himself in the very place where his nightmare had begun. Flickering fluorescent lights cast long shadows through the deserted corridors, serving to heighten his sense of unease. Alex moved stealthily through the service corridors, his senses on high alert. He knew he was being hunted. The brief moments of respite during the day had given way to the terrifying realization that the killers were undoubtedly closing in. He needed to stay ahead, to use every ounce of cunning and resourcefulness that he gained over the past few hours. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he ducked into a maintenance closet, peering through the slats of the door. A tall figure in dark clothing moved past, a knife glinting in their hand. It was one of the killers, methodically searching each room. Alex waited until the figure had passed before slipping out of the closet and moving in the opposite direction. He somehow had to create distractions to buy himself some time. He spotted a fire alarm and quickly pulled it, sending a deafening alarm ringing through the mall. The sprinklers activated, drenching everything in a fine mist. Using the chaos to his advantage, Alex dashed down a flight of stairs and into the basement level. The service corridors down here were a maze, and he hoped to lose his pursuer in the labyrinthine passageways. He turned a corner and saw a stack of wooden pallets. An idea formed in his mind. Alex quickly set to work, arranging the pallets to create a kind of makeshift barricade. He then found a length of wire and rigged it across the corridor at ankle length, hoping to trip anyone who followed. Just as he finished setting his trap, he heard the sound of rapid footsteps descending the stairs. A would-be killer had been updated as to Alex's approximate location and was closing in. He hid behind a large crate, watching as the killer rounded the corner and tripped over the wire, crashing to the ground with a curse. Immediately seizing the moment, Alex leaped from his hiding place and struck the killer with a metal pipe he'd found close by. The man groaned and tried to rise, but Alex swung again, knocking him unconscious. Breathing heavily, Alex took a moment to assess his situation. He had incapacitated one of his pursuers, but he knew others were still out there. He rifled through the man's pockets, finding a phone with a map of the mall and a list of the targets. His name was at the top. Determined to at least buy a little time, Alex used the phone to his advantage, sending a false update to the other killers, indicating he was on the opposite side of the mall and was about to take out one of the victims. They could strike Alex off their list and focus their efforts on whoever else was an innocent victim of this hideous contest. He then headed towards the main exit, moving quickly but cautiously. As he neared the exit, he heard another set of footsteps. This time he couldn't run. He turned to see another killer, this one more cautious and alert. The killer advanced slowly, weapon ready. Alex's eyes darted around, looking for anything he could use. He spotted a fire extinguisher on the wall and grabbed it, aiming the nozzle at his pursuer. The killer hesitated, and Alex took his chance. He pulled the pin and squeezed the handle, sending a blast of foam directly into the killer's face. The man staggered back, blinded and disoriented, gasping for breath due to the heavy blast of CO2 he'd just received. Alex rushed forward, using the extinguisher as a makeshift club to knock the weapon from the killer's hand. A struggle ensued, each fighting for control. Alex felt a new surge of adrenaline as he managed to land a decisive blow, sending the killer sprawling to the ground. Without giving him a chance to recover, Alex used zip ties from a nearby janitor's cart to bind the killer's hands and feet. Exhausted and soaked from the sprinklers, Alex stumbled out of the service corridors and into the main part of the mall. The emergency lights cast a sinister glow, but the exit was in sight. He knew he couldn't stay here. The other killers would soon realize they'd been duped. With a final burst of energy, Alex made his way to the exit, pushing through the doors and out into the cold night air. He didn't stop running until he reached a nearby diner, collapsing into a booth. He'd outwitted his pursuers, incapacitated 2 killers, and survived the high-stakes chase through the mall. But as he caught his breath, he knew this was only the beginning of an ordeal he had no idea how to end. The game was in its infancy, and the true masterminds were still out there. For now, though, he'd won a small victory, feeling pride at his growing resourcefulness and determination. Alex was no longer just an unwitting target. He was a survivor, ready to face whatever came next. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting a warm glow over the booth where Alex sat, still catching his breath. The adrenaline from the night's chase was wearing off, leaving him exhausted and aching. He stared out the window at the dark, empty streets, his mind replaying the day's events. The realization of the game's full extent suddenly hit him hard. This was a meticulously orchestrated hunt, possibly involving numerous killers as well as any number of innocent targets like himself. The deep web game wasn't just a twisted psychotic fantasy. It was a reality with far-reaching implications. Alex knew he'd barely scratched the surface of the danger he was in. The waitress approached, a kind smile on her face. "Can I get you something, hon?" "Oh, just coffee," Alex replied, his voice tired. "Oh, and maybe a grilled cheese sandwich. Thanks." As he waited, he thought about the 2 killers he'd incapacitated. How many more of them were out there? How many other targets were fighting for their lives right now? The questions swirled in his mind, a constant reminder of the peril he faced. The coffee and sandwich arrived, and Alex ate slowly, savoring his brief moment of normality after a night of unprecedented chaos. He knew that from now on he couldn't stay in one place for long, but he needed this respite to gather his strength and think about his next move. Just as he finished his meal, the bell above the diner's door jingled. Alex's senses went on high alert, but the figure that entered wasn't a threat. It was a young woman, her clothes disheveled and her expression haunted. She looked around nervously before her eyes locked onto Alex's. She approached his booth hesitantly. Are you Alex?" He tensed, ready for anything. Who's asking? "My name's Jamie," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm in the same situation. The game. The killers. I've been running all day." Alex studied her for a moment, looking for any sign of deceit. She was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place her. A friend, a very loose acquaintance, perhaps? But what he did know was that her eyes held the same fear and determination that he'd felt all day. He nodded slowly. How did you find me?" "I saw you in the mall," Jamie explained. "I followed you when you left, but lost you in the parking lot. I've been hiding out, trying to avoid them. Then I saw you come in here." Alex felt a feeling of relief, tinged with concern. Another participant meant another potential ally, but it also meant more complications. "So, you know about the game?" Jamie nodded. Yeah, I found out the hard way. They almost got me a couple of times, but I managed to escape. I heard some of the killers talking. They're getting updates on their phones, tracking us through the cameras. Alex sighed, leaning back in his seat. Yeah, I figured that out too. It's insane. But knowing the updates are intermittent gives us a bit of an edge. We can use it to stay ahead. Jamie glanced around the diner. Her anxiety was evident. We can't stay here. They'll find us eventually. I know, Alex said, but we need a plan. We can't keep running aimlessly. We need to find a way to stop this. Jamie looked at him, hope flickering in her eyes. Do you have any ideas? Alex took a deep breath. First, we need to gather supplies, food, water, anything useful. Then we find a secure place to rest and regroup. We have to stay one step ahead and think strategically. Maybe even find a way to disrupt their updates, buy us more time. Jamie nodded, a sense of fortitude replacing at least some of her fear. She was clearly relieved to have joined forces with Alex. I'm with you, whatever it takes. As they left the diner, the first hints of dawn were beginning to light the sky. The world was waking up, oblivious to the deadly game being played out in its shadows. Alex and Jamie moved quickly, blending into the early morning crowd, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were no longer just targets. They were survivors, united by a common enemy and a shared determination to escape the game's deadly grip. And as the new day began, they took their first steps towards taking control of their fate. As Alex and Jamie moved through the quiet streets, the first light of dawn was casting long shadows as they headed toward a secluded park. They needed some time to regroup, to share what they knew in more detail and plan their next steps. The adrenaline from the night's events was wearing off, leaving them both exhausted but resolute. Finding a bench tucked away from view, they sat down and began to discuss their situation. Alex shared the details he'd learned from the mall manager and the tactics he'd used to evade the killers. Jamie recounted her own narrow escapes and what she'd overheard about the killers' updates. We need to stay ahead of them, Alex said. Use the gaps between their updates to move. Now, let's assume they get hourly updates on our whereabouts. We should avoid areas with heavy surveillance to increase our chances. Jamie nodded. Yeah, like you said, we also need to gather supplies. We can't rely on places like the diner forever, and we need a safe place to rest and plan. I think I know a place, Alex said, contemplating an abandoned warehouse he'd passed earlier. It's not perfect, but it'll do for now. They agreed to stick together, believing their chances of survival were better as a team. With renewed determination, they set off to gather what they needed. They stopped at a nearby convenience store, grabbing bottled water, non-perishable food, and first aid supplies. They also kept an eye out for anything that could be used for self-defense or to create distractions. As they moved cautiously through the city, they shared more about their lives before the game, both of them attempting to build a bond of trust and solidarity. Alex found comfort in knowing he wasn't alone, and Jamie's presence bolstered his resolve. He sensed the feelings were mutual. Arriving at the warehouse, they found it was deserted, as deserted as Alex had hoped. They secured the entrances as best they could, making a makeshift base. For the first time in many hours, they felt a fleeting sense of safety. Their respite, however, was short-lived. As they settled down to rest, Alex's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting another update about their location. Instead, he saw a cryptic message from an unknown number. Trust no one. Someone close to you is part of the game. His blood ran cold. He showed the message to Jamie, her eyes widening in shock. What does that mean? She asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, Alex replied, his mind racing. But it almost certainly means this goes way deeper than we thought. We can't trust anyone completely. Their brief moment of peace was shattered. Alex and Jamie decided to stay vigilant, taking turns keeping watch while the other rested. They knew they had to be prepared for anything. As the first rays of the sun filtered through the broken windows of the warehouse, they heard a noise outside. Peering through a crack in the door, they saw a figure lurking in the shadows, watching the entrance. "Hey, it's one of them," Jamie whispered, fear in her eyes.
I don't think so," Alex replied, his mind racing. "Looks like he's moving on. Probably just a regular night guard doing his rounds."
Alex acknowledged and appreciated her vigilance. Their alliance was now more crucial than ever. They couldn't afford to let their guard down. As they prepared for the next confrontation, Alex couldn't shake the unease the cryptic message had brought. Who could be involved? How deep did this conspiracy go? And most importantly, how could they possibly win a game where the rules were so insidiously stacked against them? Part 2. The abandoned warehouse stood silent in the early morning light, its crumbling walls and broken windows casting long shadows on the ground. Inside, Alex and Jamie huddled together, exhaustion evident in their eyes. The events of the previous night had left them both physically and emotionally drained, but the knowledge they were being hunted still kept their senses on high alert. The atmosphere was tense and foreboding, each creak of the building and distant noise outside making them jump. They'd found temporary refuge, but it felt fragile, as if the slightest disturbance could shatter their precarious sense of safety. Despite their shared ordeal, an undercurrent of paranoia and mistrust flowed between them, fed by the cryptic message Alex had received. Alex paced the room that they'd chosen as their hideout, glancing at Jamie occasionally. She sat on a dusty crate, trying to catch her breath, her eyes darting to every shadow. They both knew they couldn't stay there long, but the need to rest and regroup was overpowering. Alex stopped pacing and pulled out his phone. "Jamie, there's something I need to ask you." She looked up, her expression wary. "What is it?" He showed her the message again. "Trust no one. Someone close to you is part of the game." Jamie's face paled, and she glanced around as if expecting an enemy to emerge from the shadows. "I still don't know what it could mean. Do you have any idea who sent it?" Alex shook his head. "I don't know, but it means we can't trust anyone completely." He decided against any kind of confrontation at this point, but he could see she was thinking the same as him. A heavy silence settled between them, thick with suspicion. Jamie opened her mouth to say something, but closed it again, unsure of how to respond. The bond they'd started to build was now under strain, each wondering if the other could be a traitor. Trying to shake off the growing unease, Alex suddenly remembered the phone he'd taken from the would-be assassin. He rummaged through his backpack and pulled it out. This might have something useful," he said, hoping to shift their focus to a more immediate problem. Jamie nodded, her eyes fixed on the phone. "Well, let's see what we can find." Alex powered it up and began to navigate through its contents, his feelings a mix of hope and dread. The phone might hold answers, but those answers could change everything. They both leaned in closer, the tension between them momentarily forgotten as they delved into the device, seeking any clues that might help them understand the deadly game they were caught in. Alex and Jamie scrolled through the assassin's phone, their eyes widening as they uncovered a list of rules governing the deadly contest. The rules were simple, yet chillingly effective. Rule 1. Contest duration. The game runs for 1 week, or until all contestants have been eliminated. 2. Updates. Assassins receive updates about their target's approximate locations every 2 hours. 3. No boundaries. The contest is not confined to the town. Contestants can run and hide anywhere. 4. Elimination. Assassins earn points and money for every contestant they kill. 5. Surveillance. Contest organizers have clandestine control of surveillance cameras everywhere. "Every 2 hours," Jamie murmured, her face pale. "That's not much time to stay ahead." Alex nodded, his mind racing. "But at least we know how they're tracking us. We can use that to our advantage."
With this newfound knowledge, Alex and Jamie began to strategize. They knew they had to be constantly on the move, never staying in one place long enough for the assassins to catch up. They needed to plan their movements around the 2-hour update cycle, using the gaps to create as much distance as possible. "Well, we'll need supplies," Alex said. "Food, water, anything to keep us going. We have to think like we're on the run." Jamie nodded. "Yeah, we should avoid areas with heavy surveillance. Stick to back roads and places where we can't easily be spotted." They mapped out a rough plan, identifying potential safe zones and routes that would help them stay ahead of their pursuers. Every decision they made was critical. Every move needed to be calculated to maximize their chances of survival. As they worked together, a nagging suspicion gnawed away at Alex. The cryptic message on his phone kept replaying in his mind. "Trust no one. Someone close to you is part of the game." Could Jamie be involved? Well, the thought seemed absurd, and yet the message had warned him to be wary. Alex tried to push the suspicion aside, but it lingered, casting a long shadow over their interactions. He found himself watching Jamie closely, looking for any signs of deceit. It wasn't fair to her, he knew, but the stakes were too high to ignore any possibility. Jamie sensed his growing distrust. She paused while they were packing their supplies, looking directly at him. "Alex, I need you to trust me. We're in this together. If we start doubting each other now, we won't survive." Her words were sincere, but Alex couldn't shake the doubt completely. He nodded, trying to hide his uncertainty. "Yeah, I know. I'm just on edge. We both are." Jamie reached out and squeezed his hand. Her eyes filled with determination. "We can do this. We just have to stick together and stay smart." Alex forced a smile, hoping his doubts wouldn't tear them apart. They had to rely on each other. Their lives depended on it. But as they moved forward, the seed of mistrust remained, adding an extra layer of tension to the desperate struggle for survival. Together, they left the warehouse and ventured into the unknown, constantly on the lookout for danger. Each step would be a test of their resolve, and also their trust in one another, as they navigated the treacherous game that threatened to consume them. The midday sun beat down on Alex and Jamie as they moved through the abandoned streets of the industrial district, searching for their next temporary hideout. The area was a labyrinth of deserted warehouses and narrow alleys, offering plenty of places to hide, but also potential traps. Alex glanced at the assassin's phone again, hoping for more clues. As he scrolled through the messages, a new one caught his eye. It was from an anonymous sender, detailing who had nominated them for the game and why. His breath caught in his throat as he read the message. "Alex and Jamie, nominated by Marcus Shaw. Reason: personal vendetta. Motive: betrayal and revenge." Marcus Shaw. The name sent a jolt through Alex. Marcus had been a close friend, almost like a brother. They'd grown up together, shared secrets and dreams. But something had changed between them a few years back, a falling out over something Alex had never fully understood. And now it seemed Marcus had orchestrated this nightmare. He looked at Jamie, who was scanning their surroundings with a weary eye. She noticed his sudden stillness and frowned. "What is it?" He handed her the phone. "Read this." Jamie's eyes widened as she read the message. Marcus Shaw? Why would he do this? Alex shook his head, feelings of anger and betrayal overwhelming him. "We had a falling out a few years ago, but I never thought it would come to this. He's using us as pawns in his sick game." The revelation hung between them like a dark cloud, the tension palpable. Jamie's face hardened, her eyes narrowing. "And how do I know you're not involved in this? Maybe this is all part of some twisted plan." Alex's temper flared. "You think I'd put myself in this kind of danger? I didn't ask for this, Jamie. I've been trying to keep us both alive." Jamie stepped closer, her voice rising. What about the message? The one saying someone close to us is part of the game. How do I know you're not playing me? Alex clenched his fists now, his voice tight with frustration. Because I've been nothing but honest with you. We're both in this mess because of Marcus, not me. The confrontation reached a boiling point with both of them glaring at one another, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. For a moment it seemed as if their fragile alliance would shatter completely. But then Jamie's shoulders slumped, her expression softening. I'm sorry, Alex, it's just all too much. I don't know who to trust anymore. Alex took a deep breath, his anger cooling. I know, I feel the same way. We have to stick together. It's the only way we'll survive. Jamie nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. You're right. We have to trust each other no matter what. We can't let Marcus win. They stood there for a moment, the weight of their shared ordeal bringing them closer. Despite their doubts and fears, they knew they had to rely on each other. Their lives depended on it. So together they resumed their search for a safe place to hide, the bond between them strengthened by their confrontation. They were determined to survive, to uncover the truth, and to find a way to stop the deadly game Marcus had forced them into. As they moved forward, they knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were resolved to face it together. The bustling city street was filled with the morning rush, people moving in every direction, oblivious to the deadly game unfolding around them. Alex and Jamie threaded their way through the crowd, their eyes scanning for any sign of danger. They knew it was only a matter of time before the next update went out to the assassins. Suddenly, Alex spotted a figure moving against the flow of the crowd, eyes locked onto them. He nudged Jamie. Hey, we've got company. Jamie glanced back and her eyes widened. We need to move, now. They broke into a run, dodging pedestrians and weaving through the throng. The assassin followed, quick and relentless. Alex and Jamie ducked into a narrow alley, using their knowledge of the city to navigate the labyrinthine backstreets. Here, Alex said, pulling Jamie into a recessed doorway. Right, we need to set a trap. Remember the update schedule. They'll know our last location soon. Jamie nodded, catching her breath. Right, what's the plan? Alex scanned the alley. We use this to our advantage. We made them think they've got us cornered, and then we strike. They quickly positioned themselves, Alex finding a spot behind a stack of crates while Jamie hid in a doorway across the alley. They could hear the footsteps of their pursuer growing closer. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he waited, every muscle tensed. The assassin entered the alley, moving cautiously. He passed Alex's hiding spot, and Alex sprang into action, shoving the crates into the assassin and knocking him off balance. Jamie leapt from her hiding place too, swinging a piece of wood she'd found, striking the assassin's head and sending him crashing to the ground. They didn't wait to see if he was unconscious. Instead, they sprinted out of the alley and back into the crowded street, blending into the mass of people before the assassin could recover. Unfortunately, their reprieve was short-lived. Another assassin, alerted by the update, spotted them and gave chase. Alex and Jamie dashed through the streets, the assassin hot on their heels. They ducked into another alley, leaping over fences and dodging obstacles. The sound of the assassin's footsteps echoed behind them, growing closer. Alex spotted a fire escape ladder and pointed. Hey, up there. They climbed the ladder quickly, reaching the rooftop of the building. The city spread out before them, a maze of buildings and narrow pathways. They ran across the rooftops, jumping from building to building, using the height and their familiarity with the terrain to their advantage. The assassin followed, but Alex and Jamie worked together, setting up distractions and using the environment to throw him off. Jamie kicked over a stack of loose bricks, sending them tumbling into the assassin's path. He stumbled but quickly regained his balance, continuing the chase. Suddenly they reached a gap between buildings that was too wide to jump. Alex spotted a makeshift bridge of wooden planks and quickly signaled to Jamie. They carefully crossed the rickety bridge, their movements swift but cautious. As they reached the other side, Alex kicked the planks away, sending them crashing to the alley below. The assassin skidded to a halt, unable to follow. He glared at them from the other side, but Alex and Jamie didn't stop to see his reaction. They continued running, putting as much distance as possible between them and their pursuer. Breathless and exhausted, they finally found a secure rooftop with a good vantage point. They crouched down, scanning the area for any more threats. For the moment, they were safe. They'd also learned another piece of valuable information. However this game was being played out, it wasn't with the use of guns. They were easily in shooting distance. That clearly wasn't an option available to their pursuer. Jamie looked at Alex, eyes filled with relief.
We did it. We outsmarted them.
Alex nodded, his mind already working on their next move, though.
We can't let our guard down. This isn't over yet. But we've shown we can fight back.
Together, they climbed down from the rooftop, ready to continue their fight for survival. The high-stakes chase had tested their resolve and strengthened their bond. They were determined to stay ahead of the game, no matter the cost. The old abandoned building they found offered a temporary haven from the chaos outside. Its cracked walls and boarded-up windows provided a semblance of security, a place where Alex and Jamie could finally catch their breath. They climbed through a broken window and found a corner to sit in, their backs against the cold, dusty walls. Alex rubbed his temples, trying to ease the tension that had built up over the past few hours. Jamie leaned her head back, closing her eyes for a moment of peace. Silence was a stark contrast to the frantic chase they'd just endured.
We need to rest,
Jamie said, her voice barely above a whisper, even if it's just for a few minutes. Alex nodded, though he couldn't shake the sense of urgency.
Yeah, you're right. We can't stay here too long.
As they settled in, the weight of their situation began to lift slightly. They shared stories about their past, revealing pieces of their lives they hadn't yet discussed. Jamie talked about her family, the people she was desperate to see again. Alex shared memories of his childhood and his friendship with Marcus, the betrayal now casting a shadow over those recollections.
So, who's waiting for you back home?
Alex asked, leaning against the wall and trying to ease the tension in his muscles. Jamie sighed, a wistful look in her eyes.
Oh, my mum and dad, mostly.
They've always been my rock. And there's Sarah, my best friend since we were kids. She's practically family. She paused, her voice dropping.
I just hope they're safe.
Alex nodded, understanding the longing in her voice.
Yeah, family's important.
I used to have that with Marcus. We were like brothers once. Jamie looked at him, her curiosity piqued. You mentioned Marcus before. What happened between you two? Alex took a deep breath, the memories flooding back.
Well, we grew up together, did everything together.
But a few years ago, things changed.
He got involved with some shady people. Started doing things I couldn't be part of.
We had a falling out, ended badly.
I never thought I'd hear from him again.
Jamie's eyes widened, a sudden realization dawning on her.
God, Marcus Shaw. Damn, you're talking about the Marcus Shaw.
Alex stared at her, surprised.
You know him?
Jamie nodded slowly.
Yeah, I do. Oh, he's the ex of my friend Sarah.
She never talked much about him, but from what little I heard, he was trouble.
I had no idea he was the same Marcus you knew.
Alex felt a chill run down his spine.
So Marcus was involved with Sarah. That's too much of a coincidence.
Jamie bit her lip, thinking.
Maybe it's not a coincidence at all. What if this is part of some bigger plan? Marcus has always been manipulative, even back when he was with Sarah.
Alex's mind raced.
It makes sense. Marcus would know enough about both of us to nominate us for this twisted game. But why? What's his endgame?
Jamie looked at him, determination in her eyes. We need to find out. We can't keep letting him control our lives like this. We have to survive this game and expose him. Alex nodded, their bond growing stronger in the face of this shared betrayal. Yeah, you're right. We have to stick together and fight back. This conversation brought them even closer, solidifying their trust in each other. Despite the dangers outside, in that moment they felt a sense of camaraderie that made their ordeal a little more bearable. They were no longer just two individuals trying to survive. They were a team, united by a common enemy and a shared goal. The room they'd chosen had an old broken TV propped up in the corner. Alex fiddled with it, managing to get it working after a few minutes. Static flickered across the screen before a local news broadcast appeared. The anchor's voice was grave. We interrupt this program to bring you breaking news. Authorities are investigating a series of seemingly random murders across the city. The victims have no apparent connections, leading investigators to believe they're isolated incidents. However, the frequency and brutality of the attacks have raised concerns. The camera cut to a scene of police officers cordoning off a crime scene. Reporters speculated about the possible motives behind the murders, but Alex and Jamie knew the truth. The game was escalating, and more lives were being dragged into the deadly contest. Jamie's eyes were glued to the screen. And it's spreading. More people are getting caught up in this. Alex clenched his fists. We have to find a way to stop it. But first, we need to survive. The news report ended, but the gravity of their situation remained. They knew the game would only become more dangerous as time went on. The assassins were relentless, and the organizers had eyes everywhere. But Jamie and Alex were determined to fight back, to survive and find a way to end this nightmare. As they prepared to move on, their resolve had grown stronger than ever. They'd faced death and come out alive. Now they had to stay ahead of the game, using every ounce of their cunning and strength. The game wasn't over, but neither was their fight. As Alex and Jamie prepared to leave the abandoned building, Alex decided to check the assassin's phone one last time. His fingers trembled slightly as he navigated through the messages and files, hoping for something, anything that could give them an edge. He found a hidden folder marked Rules and Participants. Opening it, Alex discovered a wealth of information. More detailed rules of the game, profiles of other targets, even a list of possible safe zones scattered throughout the city. Hey Jamie, look at this, Alex said, his voice a mix of excitement and dread. There are other targets. We're not alone in this. Jamie leaned over, scanning the list. And these safe zones, we could use them to plan our next moves. As they scrolled through the list of participants, one name stood out. It was someone they both knew and trusted. Sarah, Jamie's childhood friend and Alex's confidant. She'd been a steady presence in both their lives, someone they never would have suspected. Jamie's face paled. Sarah? She's a part of this? Alex shook his head, trying to process the betrayal. That doesn't make sense. Why would she do this? The revelation hit them hard, but it also fueled their resolve. Marcus made a kind of twisted sense to Alex, but the betrayal by someone so close made them more determined to survive and uncover the truth. They couldn't trust anyone but each other now. We have to keep moving, Jamie said, her voice steely. We can't let them win. As they packed their belongings and prepared to move to the next safe zone, Alex noticed movement outside. More assassins were lurking nearby, their eyes scanning the building for any sign of their targets. Yeah, we've got company, Alex whispered, nodding toward the window. Jamie peered out, her heart racing. You're right. We need to go now. They slipped out of the building, using the shadows to their advantage. The city's alleys and back streets became their allies as they navigated through the urban maze, avoiding the assassin's gaze. With every step, they grew more and more determined. This game was still far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. They knew they had to stay one step ahead, to outsmart the assassins and uncover the true mastermind behind this deadly contest. As they disappeared into the night, Alex and Jamie felt ready to face the next phase of the game. The betrayal that they'd uncovered only strengthened their bond and their resolve. They would survive, they would fight back, and they would uncover the truth no matter the cost. The city's lights flickered around them as they moved stealthily through the streets. They knew the road ahead was dangerous, but they were no longer just pawns in someone else's game. They were players, determined to win and expose the dark forces controlling their fate. So, my dear friends, I hope that was satisfactory for your Friday evening's entertainment. And let me tell you, there is much, much more to come. I've already written the next 2 parts. We're up to part 4. And I think it's going to be at least 6, maybe 8. So a few more installments of that one to come. Things are going to hot up. Conspiracies will come clear, all that kind of thing. Anyway, what's the point? You may as well just come back and listen next time rather than me trying to explain what's going to happen next time in the end here. Anyway, okay, so that is it for this evening. Thoughts, feelings, anything you would like to see happen in this story, let me know. Like I said, I've written some of it, but there's still a long way to go, and I'm not entirely sure how it's going to end yet. So, input is very much welcomed. Anyway, I am waffling on. Have a nice weekend, everyone. And until the next time, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or 2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.